Hello, everyone, and welcome to what I'm going to be calling episode 8 of season 2 of the AyeSphere. I'm I.
I'm Joy.
And to be honest, before we really begin today, we kind of want to say, look, we know that we've been a little bit AWOL for the past couple of weeks. It's been very sporadic, and it's been a mixture of illness and, to be honest, a little bit of burnout as well. We know that there's this kind of expectation that we're doing something weekly, but at the same time, you've got to take into account that we're both very busy people otherwise, outside of what we do here, and we do desperately try and do this every week, but we also need to make sure that we're looking after each other. So we did take a little bit of a break.
I would be a very poor chronic illness advocate if I was like, yeah, let's just burn ourselves to pieces doing this every week when we don't want to.
Yeah.
I'm never, if you turn around to me and say, I'm not really feeling it today, my first response is always, yeah, okay, let's take a break, because there's no point doing this if it's not fun for us anymore.
Yeah.
The whole reason we do this is because it's fun for us to hang out and talk to people. We're not doing it because it's a grind.
Yeah, and I feel like our approach is that we like neither of us have ever dragged the other one into into streaming for the AyeSphere. So yeah, you good?
I saw my camera freeze on Discord, and then it didn't freeze on Twitch. It was very weird.
Oh, okay.
Anyway,
so today we've got a wee bit to talk about. The kind of recap. We'll be covering the UK coronation of Charles Windsor, and
Charles III of England.
Yes, that rolls off the tongue. So we'll be talking about that a wee bit and the kind of stuff, probably more the stuff surrounding it than the event itself, because not many people watched. But yeah, we'll be doing that, and then we'll be going on to talking about What Remains of Edith Finch, which is a kind of narrative video game that me and Joy... Well, I kind of asked Joy if she'd played it before, and it's an interesting game to talk around. There's lots of stuff. There's from a story perspective, from a design perspective, it's quite cool. So we'll do a deep dive on that. But first, we will address the coronation. Joy, did you watch the coronation at all?
No.
No.
It was unavoidable to some degree because I was out and about in town and they had it on televisions.
Really?
On, like, display set, yeah. And I'm like,
oh man, Americans are weird when it comes to the royals.
Have a really weird relationship with royalty, or at least some of them do. Because you guys, like, I actively had to remind some members of my family, you realize you guys got rid of kings for a reason, right? You realize you got rid of the monarchy, and now you're like, oh, but they're like, yeah, it's, someone said to me, it's a once in a lifetime opportunity, and I'm like, for him, not for me. Like,
yeah, I do plan on living the 5-10 years until the next one,
I know. I have at least 2 more coronations in me. Have you seen that royal family?
Yeah.
It's just, and I'm chronically ill saying that. I fully intend to outlive them. It was a really weird kind of cultural thing for me being over here. And there were people that I felt were more into it than the people I knew back home.
Right.
And yeah, it was strange. It was almost like there's this trap that some Americans fall into, which is ye olden times were better. And it's like, you got rid of kings for a reason. We're trying to get rid of kings for a reason in Scotland. Like, it's... The nostalgia doesn't serve you any purpose. This is not a case of rose-tinted glasses. This is just fascism in a fancy hat.
Yeah, I mean, you do get a lot of Americans who are like a really big fan of things like Downton Abbey and Bridgerton. They like that kind of romanticized, like view of kind of English nobility / royalty. It is quite popular, I imagine. I wonder if there's a contingent of American folk who are like really, really into Outlander, so actually double down on the hatred of the monarchy. That would be funny. Outlander's
a really weird fandom, and So I one of these days I am going to get you to watch Outlander. I'm not going to make you read it because I care for you too much to make you read it. But I'm going to make you watch it so that you can look at it and say, what the fuck is this with me? Because
what seasons? Because I watched up until he crashed, like the shipwrecks on America at the end of season 3.
It's a really weird. We're already on a tangent here, but it's
yeah.
So it's Claire Fraser or Beecham, whatever her name is.
Yeah,
she is obviously the American author self-insert. And it is a white English woman telling Scottish people they shouldn't rebel because it is hopeless. Instead of taking her knowledge to help her lover and her new friends win the war against the English, she uses it to get them to submit because it will be easier than fighting.
Yeah, there's definitely a bit where...
Such a colonizer, insider... I know better. Therefore, I'm going to tell these people they shouldn't fight against an unjust system. I'm going to tell them they should just accept it.
Yeah, I kind of get it. Yeah, because it's like the reason for her not is that her being aware of the historical events that happen will out her as a witch in that time. There's a whole witch arc to it where you know too much kind of thing, and that's kind of trying to protect her, I believe. But then you've got I remember seeing some of the promo stuff for, I think it was either season 4 or 5, and it was like the main man Jamie Fraser in like a red coat uniform, and it was
but also fully lead into her being a witch when it's convenient for them. They fully lead into she's a fairy or she's magical when it serves their purpose. So why wouldn't they just be like, oh yeah, the Scottish have a witch on their side?
Yeah.
The Jacobeans would have embraced that. They would have been like, oh, she's a white witch who fights for Scottish independence in the Jacobean throne. Okay.
Yeah.
That would have been completely, they were so superstitious that would have been a thing. But no, it was, we have to protect her. She can't give away too much knowledge. But she can totally tell everyone to submit because reasons. But it's a very... And the fandom's very much like that. A lot of them feel as if they are the oppressed people when they actually are the colonizers that tell people how to live. And then you have the Claire Fraser character who's like, oh, I'm better than all these... Because they go to America at one point.
Yeah.
And she's like, I could never own a slave, but then she lives in a plantation for months on end.
Yes. Sorry. The bit that I remember was... So... It starts in Scotland, and then they go to France for ages in season 2, and then they're back in Scotland briefly, and then they get a ship all the way out, and there's this bit where like she educates Jamie on like slave owning is bad, and then as you say, she goes and does she basically hangs out on a plantation. So it's like, she's got all this knowledge of like how society should be, but then just kind of like it's only when it's convenient.
Yeah, it's very
she sits on a plantation otherwise.
I hate to say it, but it's very much woke signalling on behalf of Diana Gabaldon, because it's very much you have the righteous character who believes certain things and spouts moral things, but doesn't follow through with them.
Right. Okay.
And that's where I take umbrage with it, I suppose. It's that kind of you have Claire who's like, how can you believe in slavery? It's so wrong. But then she's content to be waited on hand and foot by an enslaved woman for months on end, and she doesn't say anything. She doesn't do anything to try and free these people. It would be like in my novels if Vlad, the character who is shown to be from his opening chapter to be very pro-union, pro-workers' rights, pro-reformation, if he turned around and went, actually, I quite like being at the top of the food chain. I'm just saying it for the bit so that people like me. Whereas, spoilers, his character arc is dismantling the system that puts him at the top. He commits to a heart and soul because he believes in it. I feel like Claire Fraser is a mouthpiece for, I had the author having to acknowledge that these things are terrible, but it's not convenient to the plot for Claire to do anything about it. And to me, that's just cowardice. And it's also just Diana Gabaldon's own prejudices seeping in. Because for those who aren't aware, I have personal beef with Diana Gabaldon.
We've heard this story on... We're gonna get sued by Daniel Wilding at some point. She'll end up stumbling upon this fucking show.
I definitely am. Yeah. And yes, Penny, those are stars on my neck, on my earrings. I thought it would go with the sun on my necklace. Thank you for noticing. But it's anyway. But that's the Outlander fandom is very kind of. They're either very much aware of it. They're either very self-aware and they're just into it for the fun adventure, and they can overlook some of the racism, the homophobia, and all that other stuff that's in the books. Or you have the people that are fully committed to it, and they're like, oh, but the true king is just, and they side with the idea of like Jacobean kings, and they'll send you ask.
Oh fuck yeah!
What if we put the real Jacobeans back?
Yeah, no, I hate it.
There isn't any.
Yeah, the
Stuart line is German now. Like, we don't need a monarchy. We don't need a ruling class.
I think that is like, yeah. For those of you who are unaware, I tend to get quite a lot of asks on Tumblr, specifically around like, what if we restored like the true Scottish kings? And it's like, nope. I am very hardcore, and I'd say I'm quite contemporary in my belief that just monarchy shouldn't exist at all. Like there are people who kind of go that traditional route of, oh, we don't want this line of people to have like ultimate privilege, but no, instead it's like, nah, we could just get rid of monarchies altogether. I realised we went on a belt. We went on a belter of a tangent there. So Americans obviously watching the Coronation. Why we ended up talking about Outlander was was whether there was kind of infighting amongst Americans watching it. But
it's the discussion of the fandoms, because you do have the people that are very much Downton Abbey diehards. They want the pretty houses and the tea parties. They basically want the fantasy of being wealthy enough to not have to work.
Like,
and that's fair.
Jane Austen, Pride and Prejudice kind of stuff.
Yeah. But then you brought up the Outlander, which is, I wonder if those people are dead against it. No, they just believe in the Jacobean king instead, unfortunately. Unless you're cool. If you're an Outlander fan who is not pro-monarchy, you're cool. It's the weird ones that are like, we should restore the Scottish monarchy, and it's like, we cut off Queen Mary's head for we don't want them. We don't want them.
Yeah. But so Coronation kind of came and went, I suppose, like the Saturday the 6th, I think it was. Yeah, Saturday the 6th.
I don't even know.
Very, very early in the morning, the Metropolitan Police arrested the founder and key organisers of Republic UK. Apparently, they were like planning to blockade parts of the route, but it was just pish. Like, all they'd done is hired a van to hand out placards that said "Not My King" on it. And they were arrested and held, and basically to in a completely authoritarian way, the Metropolitan Police were just able to arrest them. For a wee while, it was said that they weren't given a formal charge for a while, and then it emerged that the official charge was conspiracy to create public nuisance.
Mm-hmm.
Which is like, what the fuck?
I mean, that's when the UK started outlawing protests.
Yeah, that's the anti-protest laws, which luckily do not apply in Scotland because we're not nuts.
But that's when people were saying, like, I saw people for the first time were watching the Coronation and like, oh, fascism's really on the rise in the UK, and I'm like, it's been rising for a couple. It's not recent.
Oh yeah, we're
the king in his golden carriage being pulled down a street that's filled with wet sand because they can't afford to fill the potholes.
Yeah, that was an aerial shot and a half. It was like,
if you wrote that in fiction, you'd have people calling it a trite metaphor for the evils of capitalism. And yet it is the British reality currently. But it was, they had so many people being like, oh, we arrested these people because they thought they were going to try and startle the horses.
Yeah, as if those horses haven't gone through the most rigorous fucking training.
They get shot, like they fire cannons around those horses
Oh, yeah.
regularly. They fire ceremonial rounds into the air around those horses. And you're telling me the horses couldn't withstand being jeered at?
Yeah.
Like,
I mean, it's interesting, like, from a kind of topic of, like, in the run-up to the coronation, for anyone who doesn't kind of know, there was a lot of discussion around, like, Charles being this great modernizer of the monarchy as an institution, which is very entertaining, just on account of, like, how fucking rubbish it is. One of the things that one of the things, so, like, there was a standard coronation procedure when Elizabeth was crowned. And there's, like, a specific thing that they removed from the ceremony, which was sorry, I realised that I've got the volume section up over Joy's face there. But now so they removed this thing, and it was like the homage of the peers or something it was called. And then Charles instead decided in the 21st century to demand that millions of people across the UK recite a pledge to him during the coronation, which I'm not going to repeat because I don't want anyone to quote it out of context and think that I've pledged allegiance. But it was a full-on, like, written sentence that, like, you were basically pledging allegiance to him, his heirs, and his future successors, which, by the way, fucking includes Prince Andrew, who is a potential successor to the throne. Like, you're pledging allegiance to all that. So,
to a known predator and nonce.
Yeah.
Which, by the way, for anyone who doesn't know what a nonce is, it's a British word for paedophile. That also got, like, I am by no means a Harry and Meghan stan, but I hated the fact that Harry had to show up in a three-piece suit and Prince Andrew was in full regalia with the honours of being monarchy. And I'm like, oh yeah, they're quite happy to have a paedophile, but not somebody who fell in love with an actress.
I always think, like, the British media is really fucking bad for it, but they seem to draw very tight comparison between what Harry has put the royal family through and what Prince Andrew has put the royal family through. And it's like, one is the sexual assault of a minor, and the other one is leaving your family behind because they're fucking racist.
Yeah.
Pretty dodgy.
It shows you who they are.
Oh,
like,
yeah.
That was my mum. Like, my mum's one of those people that is like, she believes the best in people until proven otherwise. And she was like, it's not nice to call people racist unless you have proof. And I'm staring at her like as though the entire British monarchy system is not built on racism. The entire British Empire is built on a foundation of enslavement and racism and prejudice and bigotry. But she was saying these things, and I'm like, you realise, like, just because he sold his story doesn't mean the things that he talked about aren't true.
Yeah.
Just because he's getting money for it.
Yeah. I mean, the only reason he probably did sell his story was because why would you not fucking cash in on that? Like,
because they cut him off. They were cutting him off from his funds, and it's just sorry, I'm fiddling with my volume to see if I can get any higher.
I've turned you up as high as possible.
Yeah.
So it might be.
But it's as Parker Suppose says in chat, it's classic Darvo. It's like the kind of you're playing the when you have an abusive partner or abusive, parental figure, it's like, oh, you misdirect and you say, well, I never said that, but you said this, therefore you're worse.
Yeah.
So they're painting him as worse because because he made money off of things, as opposed to, the royal family that routinely makes money off of everything else that they do.
I mean,
he's calling them out.
Yeah. And I feel like there was quite a lot. So I was at the rally on Calton Hill. I was emceeing the rally, which was an interesting experience. So I basically set the tone, and then there was about 500 people there by my kind of estimate, and then we had speakers, so like various politicians and people kind of from across the kind of Scottish political and social landscape, and like one of the things that I'd kind of brought up is that like the way that the monarchy kind of conducts itself in like this day and age. I mean, it was a fucking joke that coronation cost over £100 million, right? Meanwhile, the cost of living is through the fucking roof. Families are starving. You know, people are unable to pay their like electricity bills because that's gone sky high. It's like I would almost give it the benefit of the doubt if everything was fine. Like, if the country was economically okay, then it's fine. But like the scale of the cost of living crisis at the moment, why the fuck did we waste money on this one special day for a privileged arsehole, for want of a better word?
Because the cost of living is manufactured for greed. And the coronation and the monarchy is tied to that. That is basically, you know, I know you're asking me rhetorically, but there will be some people that don't understand. The cost of living crisis in the UK is manufactured. It does not have to exist. Yeah. It has been put in place by a corrupt Tory government, and the Tories are royalists.
Yeah.
This is my soapbox. This is ended friendship for me, because there have been some people that are, you know, they're fully anti-Tory, but they're still monarchists. And I'm like, you can't. Nah,
doesn't work like that.
They are tied together. They are tied together.
See, this is what's so embarrassing about Labour, though. Like, Keir Starmer did a big fucking soppy God Save the King shit, and like Labour's official Twitter account were, you know, all we pledge allegiance to the King, and it's like, you're the fucking Labour Party, have some self-respect.
Formed from unions, from workers going on strike because they were starving and couldn't feed their children. Yeah,
it's fucking it's embarrassing. I feel embarrassed for them.
But there's always been that very kind of working class sect that is pro-monarchy.
Yeah.
There is a working class sect that is very, this is our place. And they don't realise it doesn't have to be. Like, yes, there are jobs that everyone has to do.
Yeah.
But that doesn't mean some rich fuck can sit on a gold throne and do nothing.
Yeah.
And people in his kingdom can literally be... There are children literally starving in the UK.
Oh, yeah. I mean, there's like...
It's important.
Yeah, I mean, there's videos of kids that have been interviewed by like food banks and stuff, and they're like, oh, you know, we try not to eat that much each day, you know, that kind of stuff. Bluer Lights, you're asking, how did the Party of Labour become like that? It's actually quite an interesting thing to kind of see, but basically, because of the UK political system in Westminster being what it is, you know, Labour stopped really being Labour when they started to appoint members to the House of Lords, because that's buying into, you know, the Lords of the Land being in a separate political chamber than like elected politicians, and then you've got them voting on laws, and then you get, you know, Knights of the Realm. I mean, the leader of the Labour Party is Sir Keir Starmer. And then you've got all the kind of the awards and titles which are used. I mean, like, to be honest, if you're in the UK, you probably know someone, even slightly tangentially, who's received some sort of honour from the monarchy, whether it's like an OBE or a CBE or an MBE. And that's member of the British Empire and commander of the British Empire. That's the actual fucking title. But a lot of, like, what we've found kind of in recent years is whenever these honours lists are kind of produced, it's very obviously targeted to, you know, maybe there's someone who's worked really hard in a hospital, who's done quite a lot of charity work, and they might have just been plugging away, you know, not doing it for any sort of recognition. But what I found is that the threshold of being given one of these honours is very woolly each year. So they do it to kind of buy this, oh, I've been honoured by the king, or I've been honoured by the queen. And, you know, you get that little bit of goodness. I mean, there's lots of people who reject the honours because they don't believe in them. But there's It's a way of almost buying loyalty to a degree. I will bestow an honour upon you. You'll be able to put MBE at the end of your name and this kind of shit. It's like...
It's a way of buying loyalty from people who don't have easy access into that world already.
Oh, yeah.
And they hope it shows some sort of solidarity with a lower class to be like, look, you too can achieve this.
Yeah.
When in reality, you can't. You know, you've been selected because you look good. You're good PR. That's it.
And you're a good PR exercise for the monarchy is what it really boils down to.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, just to get into the, like, I know that we're talking about the coronation, but I think we can also talk about the kind of wider, like, monarchy in this. So, in Scotland alone, the monarchy, because we still are attached to this kind of system, the monarchy needs to sign off on our laws, which means that the monarchy can basically demand exemption to any law. Otherwise, they can just refuse to sign off on it. And they are exempted from 160 laws. A lot of them are around things like land ownership.
And hunting.
And hunting, yeah, absolutely. And all the rest of it. It's a way to kind of keep that control. And of course, the monarchy is also exempt from, any sort of inheritance tax. So the monarchy don't pay inheritance tax on anything. So they can actually, squander and kind of squirrel away kind of tens of millions, while also then putting the cost of the coronation onto the taxpayer. So they're not even using the money that they save by not paying tax. They're then keeping that and getting the taxpayer to foot the bill for their kind of big lavish events, which I am disgusted with entirely. It's horrible.
The band. I mean, I think I've told this story as well. When we went to, I took Mothman, which, for anyone listening who's unaware, Mothman is the nickname Tumblr gave my husband. He's American. I took him to Scottish Parliament with me, and he found out that the monarchy has to approve Scottish laws and a bunch of other stuff, and they're exempt from certain things. So he was like baffled by this because he thought they were purely a figurehead. He thought it was a tourist attraction. So we're standing and talking to this tour guide who's taking us around Holyrood Parliament, and he starts asking these difficult questions, and I become aware of the security guards coming behind us. And he keeps asking questions, and I'm like elbowing him, like, shut the fuck up, like, just like, and he's like, what? And I'm like, you don't realize what you're doing. You're about to get put in a small cell. And then I had to be like, he's a political science major. He's just interested. He's just like curious about a foreign thing. I'm like thinking in my head, I'm going to have to explain to my future mother-in-law that her son is in jail because he was questioning how the monarchy can control Scottish law. And the security guards eventually backed off, but this real tour guide lady, she looked like someone's granny, she came over to us and she's like, are you two journalists? And I was like, no. And she's like, we had to arrest some journalists a couple of weeks ago because they were asking the same questions, and it was, they were, it was like sedition was the phrase that she used.
What the fuck?
I'm like, what is this? Is this like the 1700s? Like, is it King Henry VIII? Are we getting tried for questioning the monarchy's authority? And that was what it was like. It was such a bizarre sensation. And I'm like, I remember getting out of there, and Mothman was just like stunned. He's like, what the fuck was that? What do you mean you can't question it? I'm like, you can question it. You just can't do it in Holyrood when there's police walking around and like political figures who can hear you.
Yeah.
So that was like, it was a surreal experience. But
when was that? What year was that? Because I think they've probably
2011. So it was 2 years before we got married.
I'm wondering if they've changed that since. I'm just thinking because there's quite a lot of, I would say, like, you still, like, I think a lot of the politicians in Scottish Parliament still need to technically pledge allegiance to the monarchy when they swear in at the start of Parliament. But I think, let's just say there's quite a lot of people who have started to oppose that. I think the Scottish Greens are really good for stuff like that. The Scottish Greens absolutely detest the monarchy.
They don't give
a
fuck. They will
fuck.
say whatever they want. It's so refreshing.
It's really good. But yeah, I think that bit's always really annoyed me. Just like, because you should be swearing allegiance to the people who elected you. That's it.
Your country.
Yeah.
To your constituents and everything else, but they don't. They pledge it. I mean, this is such a minor thing. I was in Girl Guides. I was also in Girls Brigade. And when we were children, you had to pledge allegiance to the Queen.
Yeah.
When I was growing up.
I was the same in the Boys Brigade. Absolutely despised it.
And I remember saying to my dad, because my dad's always been very anti-monarchy, my mum's kind of on the fence. And I remember saying to my dad, why do I have to pledge allegiance to the Queen? And he looked at me and went, what? And I'm going, every single week they make us pledge allegiance to the Queen and salute a Union Jack.
Yeah.
And we weren't allowed to sing Flower of Scotland. We weren't allowed to sing any Scottish songs at the campsites because it was seen as incendiary and like inflammatory. And we're like, we're in Scotland.
Yeah, I mean,
we can't, like.
Yeah,
it was such a weird experience. That was one of the things that eventually drove me out because I'm like, I don't feel comfortable saluting a Union Jack.
Yeah, for me, it was like the Boys Brigade was very, very similar. I was at the Boys Brigade right up to company section. You had the Anchor Boys junior section and company section, and I think that dangerous mishmash between Christian study and support the monarchy and the UK. I was like, I hate it here. I swiftly exited as soon as I possibly could because it was just
that was also my thing. I was getting heavily into paganism and they were making it known that they did not like that. And I remember turning around because it was held in the church hall. I remember turning around and going, that's a pagan god on the side of the church. And it was like, it was an old green man. The green man's not an old god, but it's from the Victorian era. And like, that's a pagan god, that's a gargoyle, that's a demon. And they were just like, no, those are Christian things. And I'm like, no, they're not. And that was like, my mother got a letter saying, we don't want Joy to not come, but if she doesn't come, we're also not going to complain. So it was that kind of like anti-monarchist, anti-Christian streak that was born. Like, it's not even anti-Christian, it's anti-authority that comes with a lot of these establishments.
Yeah. And to be honest, I'd say that was like, I would actually say that pushed me to my awkward teenage boy atheism phase more than anything else. And I think it, like, the role of the kind of like authority aspect of that played way more of a part in, because I reckon I wouldn't have been so edgy if I hadn't have had that kind of weird Boys Brigade upbringing where it was like kind of queen and country mixed with like just studying Bible stories. It's fucking atrocious now that I think about it.
I remember doing the Girl Guide salute and doing the whole like, I pledge allegiance to the flag and to the Queen under God, and I'm like, I'm standing there and I'm going like, it genuinely, I think if that hadn't been a thing for me, I would have just coasted. I would have been normal, and instead I went full on. Like, I was.
You push back. You do. You push back. You go fuck no.
I was the person that was, in trouble because I was, using the bonfire that they were teaching us how to make like spells and shit like that. And it was like, I'm like, well, how is that any different from a prayer? I caused chaos. I was absolutely like, how are spells any different?
Sowing discourse in the Girls' Brigade.
You could see the younger ones looking at me and going, she's got a point, and that's when the teacher was just like,
fuck.
Leave, go.
Yeah. But I mean, the thing is, so Charles has had his big special day. The Metropolitan Police had an absolute doozy arresting the protesters, and then the day after, they tasered an unarmed man and shot 2 dogs on video. Right? So they've not had a very good PR week since then.
When does the Metropolitan Police have a good PR? They're either kidnapping women, holding them down in protests, or killing people, or planting drugs on people, or they're going after immigrants. Like, when are they having good PR? They're not.
Yeah. Yeah, that's very fair.
But the monarchy was a lot of people going, but this is supposed to be a celebration, and meanwhile the police are out with batons and just beating fuck out of people, and you're just like,
I mean, so there was a story that I saw where it was like, and the thing is I'm annoyed that this story exists. I'm obviously annoyed that it happened to the woman, but I'm also annoyed that the story exists because she got placed higher on the kind of national news list because she was a royal superfan. Now, she was a royal superfan who was invited to the garden party prior to the coronation. And she was standing on a bollard or something like that, taking photos of the coronation procession. But she unfortunately stood next to some Just Stop Oil protesters and was arrested and held for fucking 18 hours. And she went to the news about it, and she was like, that was a once in a lifetime event. I was all ready to take photos of it, but they arrested her because they thought that she was a protester. The thing is that I don't think the point of her story was kind of the police behaviour at the coronation. I think she was just complaining about it from a "this sucks for me" kind of perspective. So
didn't get my pictures. I didn't get to see the coronation. I was wrongfully arrested because there's a systemic problem within the police.
Yeah, so it's like, yeah, I'm both on that definitely shouldn't have happened to her, but also, why did she get more attention than the other peaceful protesters who did nothing wrong? So yeah, there's that element to it as well. But we're a week on. Charles had his special day and has done fuck all since. The thing is that I think he will need a separate coronation in Scotland, which is a much smaller affair. But I think it's traditional that there is the kind of coronation down in Westminster, and then there's like a smaller mini coronation here, which sucks. So yeah, not looking forward to that.
I mean, why does he get two? And that was like
more public money.
The king and the queen get 2 birthdays. Why? Like, why is that a thing? Why do they get 2 coronations? Why do they get 2 birthdays? Like, money.
Yeah,
they get public money.
Yeah,
and yet you have people that are going, they bring in tourism. Versailles manage is fine. Like, they don't need them.
All I'm saying is that France makes more money per year off of tourists to all of its palaces that are empty than we do out of... Cause, I mean, they're like, tourists come to see the buildings. They don't come to see the... Who gets the chance to see the people? I'm just saying, the French had a pretty solid idea, you know?
Yeah.
Let's get rid of all of the monarchs and then open up the palaces and make bank. That's...
The one thing one of my editors said that has continually tickled me pink every time they've said it is, may he have the luck of the Charleses before him. Which, if you're not aware of your history, one got beheaded and one died mad from syphilis. So, fingers crossed.
There we go. So, Lorba Borb, you're asking us to explain the special Scottish stone he had under his chair, which, to be honest, I was of kind of 2 minds when it came to this. So, like, it's called the Stone of Destiny or the Stone of Scone. Scone being a place in Scotland where it was from. And it's a stone that was previously used where, like, all old Scottish kings of old were crowned on, right? And there was a big thing, I think it was during the 1950s, where, like, as part of the Union and all the rest of it, Union of the Crowns, the stone had been in Westminster Abbey. I think it was Westminster Abbey at least for, a couple of 100 years. And a bunch of students from Glasgow, I think it was 4 students from Glasgow, went down to London and stole it back. And that was really quite a pivotal moment in terms of, like, Scottish nationalism. Because it's literally the the king or queens of England getting, sitting on a throne with the Stone of Destiny under it, it couldn't be more kind of symbolic of like the subjugation of, Scotland as a nation, blah, 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 blah. It's a stone, and I can't wait until it's sitting in a fucking museum somewhere and we don't talk about it with anything. Because I don't care that much about it. However, I would have thought it would have been fucking funny if the Scottish government, had put up a bit of protest about it being moved. It would have been really funny. Hey, look at Holly.
I need to show you her tail. She's going absolutely bananas in the background. Hi, do you want to be on camera?
When does she not want to be on camera? But yeah, the Stone of Destiny is like there. It was taken back down to Westminster Abbey to be placed underneath the chair, the gilded throne that Charles sat on, and had a crown worth millions placed on the top of his head. So yeah, that was pretty much what it's for, and I'm kind of looking forward to it not being that relevant.
It needs to be in a museum.
Yeah,
it's an important cultural artifact.
Yeah, so it's like a cool historical artifact, but I don't want it to have a use. I want it to be a thing with a good little plaque beside it that we go, this is what it was used for, and that's kind of cool. We could put it in a glass case under a chair in a museum in Scotland, and everyone could just have turns sitting on it. That'd be good, actually. That'd be funny. But yeah, I think, well, again, not really heard much about the monarchy this week because, as you say, they have these big lavish events and then they fucking disappear and they just squirrel money and spend taxpayers' money. So I don't expect to hear from them for a while. There'll probably be a title or two given out.
He'll do some basic kingship where he'll knight some people and be like, oh, look at me, I'm such a benevolent modern ruler, as he continues to uphold
the thing is, he's
centuries old.
He's like 74 or something like that.
Yeah.
Like, is he going on a royal tour? Like, I mean, he's not worked all of his life, but like, I can't imagine him getting crowned king and then him like, oh, you're going to be visiting Canada and you're going to be visiting Australia. You'd be like, oh, fuck, do I have to? Like, like that, like not of any disrespect for those guys, but he can't be arsed. He's fucking ancient.
He's king, and he's probably sitting there going, "I'm king. Why do I have to do anything?" Yeah, but he's done the royal tours before as the Prince of Wales.
Yeah,
he did all that with Diana, which I am still resolutely referring to him as Princess Diana's ex-husband. I'm not even a particularly huge Diana fan. I just think it's funny to be the whatever, but
oh, sorry. Did you see it was one of the MBEs or the CBEs or something like that, and they decided to do a Twitter thread on Meghan Markle and how it was fucking bad. Like, he was going on about how she'd been divorced, therefore it was obvious that she was not a good judge of character, therefore was ill-fitting to be part of the royal family. And it's like, Charles and Camilla are right fucking there.
And
like, Camilla's been divorced. They had an affair. Yeah, it's like, fucking hell. But yeah, just another... to be honest, a lot of monarchists and like a lot of like full-on royalists have this like ridiculous tunnel vision when it comes to the monarchy, to the point where it's embarrassing. Like... Yeah. Like the blinkers are on, like even more so than the horses that pull the carriages. Like they don't. I honestly don't think there's any sort of like critical thinking or thought in them.
The thing is, they're happy with the way the world is, and that scares me more than anything. Like the idea that you can be happy with the way this world is right now, that you support a monarchy, tells me more about your character than if you called me a slur. It's like, okay, you're going to you're polite about it, but you're still okay with this.
Yeah.
It's like, I'd almost rather you were upfront and called me the slur. It's it's such a weird disconnect from me, someone who, I mean, I grew up very politically active. My dad's always been SNP, and he's always been anti-monarchy and everything. I mean, I used to go to rallies on my dad's shoulders. There's probably a photograph somewhere of 3-year-old me holding a sign that's like, abolish the monarchy. But it's so weird to me for that disconnect, for some people to go, yeah, I quite like being oppressed.
Yeah.
I quite like my tax money being put into useless things instead of fixing the roads or the infrastructure or, making sure children can eat. It's such a weird mentality that I just cannot identify with. And part of that is growing up working class and poor. Part of it is growing up very much politically aware. But then also it's just from looking around the circumstances and seeing the everyday people need better. They deserve better. Like, so many human rights are being violated in the UK right now.
Yeah.
And meanwhile, they're throwing a 2 million party so a man can put his mother's hat on. It's just
2 million's just the 2 million is the conservative estimate of the crown that he put on his head.
Yeah.
And it's just
all of
fucking
all
nuts.
All these stolen jewels from when they colonized the world.
But that's the thing. There's the scepter that he had, that has one of the. It's priceless, obvious, but it's like one of the largest diamonds. I think it's called like the Heart of Africa or something. Is embedded in this fucking scepter. It's just, oh man, it's so embarrassing. It's so embarrassing.
It's just such a. I don't know. I keep using the word colonizer, but it is a very much. We're proud of the colonization and the harm we did, and it's just like, I'm uncomfortable with that. I'm very much like, I didn't grow up being aware of the role Scotland played in a lot of the British Empire until I was much, much older. Yeah. But that was also because we weren't allowed to learn Scottish history when I was in school, because it was seen as being anti-English.
Yeah.
It's slightly better now, I'm led to believe, but
it is.
It was still like that. I mean, that's the span of 10 years between you and me. Yeah. Like the span of that 10 years, we weren't allowed to do Scottish literature in schools because it could be seen as a political stance. But now it's like, oh well, you have like this kind of like this movement, and like in Glasgow especially, they're trying to protest to change the names because a lot of the streets in Glasgow are named after slavers.
Yeah.
Like they're named like Jamaica Street and Campbell, and it's like
there's only one reason that's the case,
and it's because they were slave owners. And Scotland, at least certain parts of Scotland, are trying to be like, hey, we don't want to be complicit in this anymore. But then you have these huge displays of wealth happening, coming from the head of the country, who's claiming to be modern and to be like, a fresh take on monarchy. There is no fresh take on monarchy. Yeah. With regards to the British. With regards to the UK, there is no fresh take on monarchy because the monarchy has always been a force of colonisation in the UK. Yeah,
it's a good thing to say that. And sorry, just before we continue, cybernetic, it's the Great Star of Africa, not the Heart of Africa. That's the name of the diamond. It is the largest clear-cut diamond in the world. But
we've got fact checkers for us in the comments. It's great.
Yeah, exactly. They're just keeping us honest. But it's funny. One of the speakers at the rally in Calton Hill, a woman called Malini Chakrabarti, she was talking about how Scotland's move towards a republic will be tied with our process of like almost decolonization, as in we need to be hyper aware of Scotland's role in this, because only through that will we then be able to actually formally distance ourselves from the monarchy in that way. It's interesting you talking about the Jamaica Street and stuff like that as well, because it was obviously Barbados last year managed to escape. They've cut ties with the monarchy entirely, but Jamaica in the run up to the coronation said that a mixture of royal visits, and you all saw those terrible photos of Kate and William visiting Jamaica. So a combination of those royal visits and this kind of all of the discussion around this coronation and Windrush had basically has made Jamaica want to accelerate its timeline. They're potentially having a referendum on the monarchy in 2024 now, which is fucking funny. I really hope.
Love to see it.
Oh yeah,
Love
I honestly, I wish everyone in Jamaica well in getting rid of this shit.
It would be so funny. It would
be fucking hilarious.
It would
yeah.
be fucking. As a Scottish person, it's fucking hilarious. But it's also a major victory if they do.
Oh, it's a massive victory for them. And then, of course, like, again, you mentioned Campbell as well. There's a reason why Campbell's one of the more popular surnames in Jamaica, and it's entirely Scotland's fault. We did Jamaica pretty dirty there.
It's like, this is another tangent, but I don't know if anyone watches Sandington. No. It's the PBS masterpiece, BBC, whatever. It's them taking Jane Austen's unfinished last novel and turning it into a disaster that's incredibly un-Austen. But they have entire like series like dedicated to the role of slavery and sugar plantations, and they have a black heiress who's fighting against sugar and trying to boycott sugar, even though her wealth as the daughter of a slave that was adopted by the wealthy plantation owner. It's such a muddled, convoluted timeline, such a muddled storyline. But it's this whole like the family acknowledges that their money came from wealth and they hate it, but they don't give it away. And it's I work to better the lives of others, but why should I give up the wealth that my ancestors gave me? Whereas you actually have people that are ancestors of there was they interviewed some people that were ancestors of like slave owners, when people were like, oh, we should get rid of the statues, and they cut to the people that were like the descendants, and they're like, oh yeah, we should throw them in the river, like that has no place here. But it was like an attempt of the BBC to be like, yes, there were some unethical things done, but look, the people, like, they're happy like this, you can see it, and it's just like, it's such a weak storyline. It's such a it
sounds terrible. Sorry, just had a breaking news from the National. They have said that there is no set date on when the Stone of Destiny will return to Scotland. Great.
Fantastic.
Watch is, we're gonna have to get a bunch of students for Glasgow to fucking nick it again.
Do you fancy a heist? I've not been home in like 5 years. Let's just do it.
That would be fucking hilarious, to be fair.
We'll TikTok it the whole time. We'll just record the whole thing.
Right. I think that's us. We can wrap up our Coronation talk as we transition to What Remains of Edith Finch.
Yes.
I'd played the game before, and I replayed it before we had this chat. Joy, was this your first time playing it?
It was. So I owned the game. Yeah. And I'd watched other people play it, but I'd never played it myself.
Right, okay.
So I knew what I was getting into, but whilst I was playing it, it was a different level of unnerving. Because when you're watching someone else play it, you can be kind of detached from certain things. Whilst playing it, I found myself having, certain parts of it, I was having like a full-on ADHD crisis. I was like, this is there is so much multitasking happening right now, and my attention's going all these directions. I'm going, this is a nightmare. This is awful. So thank you for that experience.
Oh, you're very welcome. So to give everyone the lay of the land, What Remains of Edith Finch is a narrative-driven game where you take the role of Edith, who comes back to her family house after years and years of being away. It's been left to her in a kind of will. Her mum passed away and has given her a key, and that key opens something within the house. And like, you start off on this boat and you look down at a journal on your kind of lap, and she opens it and she starts reading from it, and like the words and how the words are displayed on the screen a lot in this game is really quite interesting. They do like quite a lot of cool things with words, and like everything's written, and whenever you see things in this book, like bits of text will highlight, and they basically use that as like scene transitions. Mm-hmm. So the first view is like you're standing quite a bit away from this house, and the house is like this I want to describe it as almost like a kind of series of unfortunate events, kind of monstrosity. Like it's such a silly looking house. As in, there's a kind of normal house, but then it's got this kind of like climbing tower as like more and more rooms have been added on, and it's got like, you know, the kind of wooden scaffolding that like makes it I'm trying to think, have any of you ever seen a series of unfortunate events? And I think it's like the third book, how there's like that one that's attached to the cliff and it's like it's almost falling off and it's got all of the wooden supports underneath it. It's kind of like that, right?
It's Waffleford just said in chat. It's my house, but less awful.
Yeah.
My house is a bastard amalgamation of additions that don't make sense sometimes. Not quite as bad as the Edith Finch one, but it's very much like a almost like the house from Coraline a little bit. Like it's very like the attachments are kind of like latched onto this kind of older looking building, and it doesn't make much sense. Which is a bit like the plot when you first get into it. You're kind of wandering around this house going, where the fuck at? Like, what is this?
And like the house itself is really interesting. So like you don't go through the front door. The key doesn't open the front door. Instead, you have to to enter the house. You crawl through the cat flap or the dog flap, the pet flap.
Dog door, yeah.
And you kind of climb through there and start to explore the house, and you kind of go up through the garage and then through the kitchen and stuff. And what you kind of immediately notice is that every single door to a bedroom has been like sealed up with like foam. Like you cannot open the door at all. And also every single door has like a outside in peephole installed. So you can look with names and dates underneath it. So like for example, Molly's bedroom 1937 to 1948 or something like that is etched onto this door in a very official looking plaque, but it's like you can look through the peephole into these rooms, and all of the rooms are sealed up. So there's only I suppose like this is about the Finch family. The Finch family has a lot of people in it, and they've all lived in this house at one time or another, and you don't know really what happened to them. So you now get to like go through each room and explore. And to start with, you go into like a room owned by Walter, where you find a book that has a padlock on it, and you can use the key. And opening the book with the key, the book has a lever inside it, and it like opens up pathways between the rooms. And it kind of starts you on this weird maze-like journey throughout the house, going from room to room and learning all about the members of the family. It's quite freaky like that.
I was not that fazed by it first because we have that in our not quite the same setup.
I wasn't.
We have in our basement. There's a door that was welded and concreted shut, and when you get into it, it takes you through crawl spaces that go through the bedrooms that are down there, and it's got like weird soundproof padding in it.
Oh God!
So when we opened that, we were like, "Oh, we just unleashed a curse!" Like when we finally got that, like we had to like saw it open. It was like, "Oh, we should have just left that. That was keeping something in there." But like, I'm told that's not the normal expectation most people have.
I wasn't weirded out by the pathways. I actually thought all of the passages are really fucking cool. Like I'm just thinking, like if you were a kid in this house, hide and seek would be fucking amazing. Was my first kind of thought. But on your journey, you go to the first real room that you find out a little bit is owned by Molly. Molly was like, I think it's supposed to be you're in contemporary times. It's like, you know, it's 2017-ish.
I think so, yeah.
In game. So like you're exploring this, and like Molly's room, I think it was like 1937 to 1947. So Molly died when she was 10, and you get to figure out what's going on. Joy, do you want to maybe explain a bit about Molly's section? Because it's like, what the fuck?
Molly gets locked into her room by her mother, and she's hungry. Like she starts her diary with, "I was sent to bed hungry," so she was eating everything. In the room, she was eating like her hamster's food. She was eating the toothpaste. She was eating poisonous berries off of a decoration.
I think it was mistletoe. Actually, it's like mistletoe berries.
It's holly and mistletoe, which are both poisonous to humans.
Yeah.
And after she does that, she starts having these visions where she's a cat. She's a cat chasing a bird. She escapes out through her bedroom window, and she chases this, turns into a cat, and she's chasing a bird. Well, she catches the bird and eats it. Eating the bird turns her into an owl. So she becomes an owl, and she starts hunting rabbits. Yeah. But then her appetite can't be sated with any of these things. She eventually becomes a shark, which I actually laughed out loud when she
that was fucking
shark. Because you're in the middle of forest and you have to roll downhill to get to the ocean.
Yeah, it is like it's like one of those like browser games that you played when you were at school. Yes. It's like you roll the shark down a hill, like bumping into trees and stuff.
Yeah, and then you get the shark into the water, and even the shark's too hungry, so you become a sea monster that eats people.
Yeah.
And it just keeps going and going until the monster gets into the house. The monster finds its way back from the ocean into the house. It crawls up through the toilet, which, thank you for that nightmare. I finally got over my fear of snakes in the toilet.
You don't have a thing for tentacles in your toilet, no?
No, I need one now. But the monster gets under her bed, and she's aware of it there because she wakes up and she realizes it's under the bed, and the monster is waiting for her to fall asleep so it can eat her. And her last words that she writes in her diary is, "We both know I'm going to be delicious." Yeah. And then it's implied that she dies.
Yeah. And I think like it's left, like the first time playing it, it's kind of ambiguous, but then it's like it was obviously the berries that she ate, and she was like basically hallucinating or dreaming or whatever. Weird that she was able to write in the diary.
Yeah. Mistletoe will make you trip absolute balls. It will, before you die, it will make you see colours only known to mantis shrimp. It's kind of implied that it's that kills her, but she's tripping balls all the time. But she's writing, her writing's fairly lucid for someone that's on a trip. Yeah. But that's kind of the theme for you go through the rest of the house, and the family members all die in horrific manners.
Yeah. And it's like they all die, and it's like it's all around the theme of this like Finch family curse. And it's like it got to all of them. So like from one thing that I found quite interesting, like about this game from a design perspective, is that the bits that you play, because you play through the stories of the people who die. So because you escaped through the window to become the cat in Molly's story, you like escape through the window and progress to the next room of the house. That's kind of how it works. And you end up going along to a room that I think it's the grandmother's room, but it has a shrine to the great granddad. And it tells you the story of how the Finches were like this like infamous family in Norway that were both very lucky and very unlucky, to the point where, to escape what they thought was the family curse, the great-grandfather Odin decided to set sail with the entire family house on a ship. As in, they moved the entire house to come over to America. And I think they get about 500 meters away from shore. Yeah. and it breaks. Like the ship sinks, the house sinks with it. It's a total disaster.
And the guy goes down with it.
And the guy goes down with it, leaving the rest of the family to basically get washed up ashore and to build a new house from scratch.
See, that was my, like, the idea of it being a family curse. I'm like, I would be leaving everything behind. Like,
oh yeah,
the house?
Why would you take the house? It's like the only other thing it would attach to. Just come over and build a new house.
I know, like, you're coming to America, build your own goddamn house. Like, it was such a weird, the whole thing is weird, but I remember, like, as someone who we grew up believing there was a family curse, right? In our family.
Okay.
And it turned out to be my Ehlers-Danlos syndrome, which is a genetic mutation which can cause disabilities and health issues. But the family genuinely believed they were all cursed. So we had a lot of weird... This game was weirdly reminiscent to me of all the weird shit people do when they think they're cursed. Because, like, my mother, my grandmother, my great-grandmother, it was the whole, we're all cursed because, like, I don't remember what it was. It was something like, they stepped into a fairy circle or something stupid like that. But it was this whole idea that we'd been cursed. And I was the one that was like, nah, it's genetics. It's a genetic disability. That's why all the women die in these horrible situations. Yeah. But that was like the kind of like the irrational things people do when they think they're cursed. My family not once ever brought a house with them. They were like, fuck that. We're leaving everything behind that could be cursed. Like, it was very much like, I was like, that's a guy that's committed to being cursed. That's a guy who wants to drown inside his own house.
Oh, definitely.
On the ocean.
And yeah, so from that section, you continue, and I think you come out into like the twins' room, Sam and Calvin, and there's quite a lot of good environment kind of storytelling here. Like, obviously you kind of learn what happens anyway, but like one of the things is like the back of Sam and Calvin's door has like side by side height measurements, but like Calvin's stops at like really hard at a certain height, and Sam continued to mark his height. So like Calvin's dead, for those of you who don't know, and you learn his weird story. You kind of climb up into, it's like a wee play pit that's designed to be like a rocket ship, and you learn his story, and he was on a swing on the edge of a fucking cliff.
Who builds a child's swing set on the edge of a cliff?
And it's like,
who does that?
And like you have to control Calvin's legs, and like one of them has a cast on it, and it's like you're swinging backwards and forward, and the whole idea is that it's Sam narrating his brother's death, because it's like what you're reading when you're viewing the story. You're reading like Sam's written a letter to his dead brother in like a kind of like, oh, you just wanted to fly kind of thing. So Calvin is swinging, and the idea is that you go around the branch that is tied to, and there's a bit where like, basically you build up enough momentum, and then the wind picks up, and you just continually going, and it launches. Like, you see it in first person as well. It launches this boy like fucking like miles. Yeah. It's like he's gone. He gets yeeted. He's yeeted by the wind. And that's the second story, or the third story, and the kind of the next death. So Calvin's dead. Next up, I think, is Barbara. Joy, I'll let you retell
Barbara's
horror one.
The child
star. Yeah.
She's the child star, and it's kind of the sad commentary about what happens to child actors as they age. And you're reading a comic book, which I think is really interesting.
That's cool.
And it's the death of Barbara Finch. And it's like this whole... It's set up as the premise as she's trying to revive her career by going to a convention, and everyone wants her to do her famous childhood scream, but because she's aged, she can't do it anymore, because she can't do the little girl high-pitched squeal anymore.
Yeah.
And... but then like their dad's injured, so there's blood everywhere, and they run off to take him to hospital, and she gets left with her brother, and she can't go to the convention anymore. Her shit-ass boyfriend tries to scare her into thinking they're under attack from like hoodlums who are killing people. Yeah. And like hides in the fridge downstairs and frightens her, and then
in the basement. He hides in the basement fridge, which of course everyone has.
Yeah, and
it's so weird.
She throws him out because she's like, oh, if you're just going to be an asshole, just leave. But she keeps his crutch for some reason. And then you use the crutch as a weapon, because it later turns out that you are under attack from like this kind of like serial killer person. So you're going through your haunted house, and you're being hunted by this guy, and you're using the passageways to get around him, and then you attack him and he falls down, but then when you get down to see his body, he's not there. And the doorbell rings, you go to answer the door, and then you realise that it's actually people are inside the house with you. And for a brief second, it's set up that it's the convention people. The people from the convention came to see you because they love you, and she's so happy. And then she realizes, oh, these aren't people in costumes. These are actual vampires and werewolves. And, she's so happy because she gets to give the performance of her life as she gets torn to pieces. And she gives like a fantastic final scream before she dies. And it's like a really weird kind of like, oh yeah, monsters are real. And they are fans of little girls in horror movies. And kind of like, it's her infamy that kills her because they want to give her final send-off. It's weird. It's a lot of fun, but it's very kind of like...
It's a fun comic, but it's also kind of like... I think Edith remarks about her grandmother a lot throughout this, throughout like walking through the house. She's like, it's weird that her grandmother made a shrine that included this like tabloidy comic about the death of her daughter. It seems a bit fucked. It's like this kind of I don't know how to really describe it. It's this kind of like fucked up portrayal of it.
There's Edith Finch, who is your character, and then there's the original Edith Finch, who's like the grandmother who wants to tell you all the creepy stories. She wants to memorialize the tragedies.
Yeah, and so it's Edie. Edie is the name that the game gives. It is Edith, but it's Edith Senior. Edie. And
but before I'd seen the game, and when I, if I hadn't known what was happening, I would have been expecting her to be the final villain. Yeah. I would have been expecting a final showdown with Edie, because it's like, oh, the little gentle grandma that memorializes like all these tragedies in our family. Like, what's the one common fact?
To be fair, I think she still is. We'll get to that, but I think she's still the villain by the end of it. But yeah, it's weird. Like, one thing that I would say is that each of these like stories kind of plays out a little differently. There's like quite a lot of cool gameplay stuff happening here. Like, when you were playing as Molly and you're playing as the different animals versus like, you're going through a cat, you're an owl, and then you were doing the comic stuff, and it's quite cool because you're moving around within a comic strip, and the game's art is all like comic book kind of styled, lots of kind of heavy shadows and outlines and stuff. It's quite cool. But the cool thing about that story is that it also teaches you how to explore the next bit of the house. So like, there's a bit in the comic where it's like you get the key to the basement by like unlocking, like it's like you spin a music box and you keep on winding up a music box and then the key pops out.
I guess the dad that built it liked to make the house into a living puzzle, because nothing says well adjusted like turning your house into a labyrinth. And it was like, you turn the music box and the music box keeps playing and then the key pops out and then you can get into the basement, which is otherwise locked at all times.
Which is also really fucking weird. But yeah, you then venture down into the basement and you go to the fridge where Barbara's boyfriend was hiding in the original, but you find that the fridge is actually a secret passage, because while Barbara was getting murdered or getting killed in the comics, her brother that she was looking after, Walter, was hiding under his bed. And what you learn is that after that, Walter decided to live under the house for 30 years. So you venture down through the fridge, through to this like secret path, and you find
prepper bunker.
Yeah, it's like Walter's prepper bunker, where the stories is that in fact, that's the thing, in Edie's room there's a newspaper where it's like a mole man lives under the Finch house. But it's Walter who, when you're doing his story, like this one's a bit more simple in terms of gameplay. It's not as interactive, but it's you basically just you're unscrewing, you're opening a can of peaches with a can opener
over and over and over again for 30 years.
Yeah, for like as the years tick by on a calendar kind of beside you. And it's all about like Walter's journey to build up the courage to where he eventually leaves the home. And instead of going up through the basement, he goes like down into like another section of the bunker that he lives in and takes a sledgehammer to a wall where he gets out, he kind of steps out onto like a railway tunnel. He's in a railway tunnel.
Yeah.
And like, you know, the music swells and he's really hopeful and he's saying, oh, I'm so glad, you know, like I managed to get over my fears. I'm looking forward to one, like even just one more day. And he's like, I can't wait to try all the food. And then he gets fucking hit by a train. Like,
I'm confused about it because they're on an island and it's implied that theirs is the only house.
Yeah. Yeah. I don't quite know, but he got flattened by a train.
He gets flattened by a train, he does.
And so then you end up leaving, like you basically leave his bunker in the same way that he left his bunker. And one thing that I thought was really sick is there's a memorial to Walter where he got hit. And there's like a toy train.
Train.
What the fuck?
I feel like that's an Edie thing. She just put a toy train on top of where you got hit by a train, and I'm like, I think he killed you. I think the family curse of Edie's just killing people.
Edie is just killing people. But yeah, you then go out onto like a beach area, and you go up to the cemetery, and you learn that the Finch family curse is so strong that when they got washed ashore, they built the cemetery before they built a house.
I mean, Goth respects Goth with this one. I would do the same, but yeah, it's just very. It is like that kind of like, oh yeah, like Edie put everything into designing the cemetery. Like the narrator actually tells you Edie designed every inch of the cemetery, and I'm like, why is Edie so invested in the cemetery?
Yeah, really invested because it's a pet cemetery as well. Yes. It's both a pet cemetery and a regular cemetery, and like all of the, you would think that all of the, I mean, some of the graves have like quite tailored personality traits to the people, but then it also has a personality trait that's tied to their death as well. Yeah. Which is kind of strange. And then you've got
a total serial killer thing. It's almost like a trophy.
Yeah. And you do a lap of the cemetery. There's no story or anything there from there's not another story or another death that's happened. But you end up like climbing up into like a treehouse and then scrambling along to the roof, and then you get in at the top. Yeah. And I'm trying to remember who the next Sam. There you go. I'll let you do Sam because it's fucking. I laughed a little bit just because it's like, you fucking dumbass, Sam.
So Sam is, so Edie is the great grandmother, isn't she?
She's the grandmother.
Grandmother.
Sam and Edith, your character's mother, and Sam are siblings, I believe.
So Sam takes Dawn, who is Edith's mother, on a hunting trip to hunt for stags and stuff, because he's also very like doomer and preppy and like, you need to know how to survive, you need to know how to hunt, and it's like she's taking the whole thing is taken through pictures. So every time you take a picture, you get another piece of narrative about like, you know, what the dad's doing, and it's very scenic at first. It's very nice. You're taking pictures of like coffee mugs and like the lake and birds and deer, and then it cuts to you are Sam and you're holding the camera and you're filming Dawn shooting a deer that she really doesn't want to kill.
Yeah.
And when you click it next, it's the scene is the animal being killed, and it then transitions to Dawn's crying over this fallen animal, and you know Sam's trying to get a good selfie shot with both of them together. and she makes the comment of, it's still moving, it's still moving. And he's like, no, that's normal, it's just twitching because it's dying. And then he picks it up to hold it up for the camera, like, the kind of standard hunter pose. And it's not dead yet, and it yeets him off the cliff. Yes. And Dawn basically sees her father plummet to his death, or his I think, is it the uncle or the father?
I think it's her father, actually.
I think it's her father too. But
yeah. Sorry, Edie's the great. Yeah, fucking hell. This is sorry. I'm looking up the family tree at the moment. It's Odin. Then it goes Edie and Sven, who have Molly, Barbara, Calvin, Sam, and Walter. Sam and Kay have Dawn, Gus, and Gregory, and then Dawn has Lewis, Milton, Edith.
It's very convoluted. It's a very kind of like, you're trying to go through this family tree that's just like, who is who? Yeah. But anyway, Sam plunges to his death because he did not put the animal out of its suffering. He was willing to let it bleed to death slowly.
And the funniest thing is the camera captures this in the most, because it's on a timer, it captures it in the most like ridiculous fashion. And it's weird that it's just, the death photo is just in a folder in the house.
Like, why would you keep it? I mean, again,
all the things.
Serial killer vibes from Edie, man, because it's just like, we keep all these photographs of all of our dead relatives as they're dying. It's just like, okay. And understandably, after that, the narrator tells you that Dawn leaves for a while.
Yeah.
She fucks off to India to teach English. Good for her. Gets married, has kids, and then unfortunately comes back for whatever reason. I think her husband dies.
Her husband dies. The family move back in with Edie.
Yeah.
And then shit continues.
And then the curse continues as it goes after Dawn's children.
Yeah.
Who is Edith, who is walking around with us who is the main character.
Yeah. And then Lewis and Milton, who we'll come on to. And then from Sam, after Sam, you've probably got one of the saddest ones in my mind, just because it's like it's a bit tough. But there's Gregory, and Gregory, you're playing as a baby.
You're an infant. Quick trigger warning. It is an infant death.
Yeah,
okay.
and it's in first person. You're playing as this baby, and you've got, what is the name of that song? It's one of the fuck, what is it? It's one of the ballet ones.
It's a waltz. Is it
not one of the ballet songs?
It's not Dance Macabre, no. Let's see.
Is it Nutcracker? Is that the Nutcracker?
I'm seeing if
fuck.
If you like classical sounding music, you should check out the movie. I don't want that, Reddit. Come on.
I might.
Waltz of the Flowers by Tchaikovsky.
Okay.
I knew it was a waltz.
I can't believe none of you fucking got that from my amazing rendition of it. But yeah, so that's playing, and you're playing as a baby in the bath, and the mum goes away to answer the phone, and you've got this kind of tense bit. The baby's just playing, like there's a frog in the bath, there's a couple of ducks, there's like, it's all the baby toys, and like more and more get added in the imagination of the baby. And eventually the mum comes back and turns the bath off and say, look, it's time to get out. And then the phone goes again, and she leaves. And this is all told through a letter that's like a note that Sam wrote to his wife Kay to finalize their divorce, to say that it is, look, you're not to blame for what happened to Gregory. Yeah, which is total bullshit and is 100% her fault. She left a fucking baby unattended in a bath, and sorry, I feel really strongly about this. She left an unattended baby in a lot of bath water.
No, she drains the tub. That's the thing. She does drain the tub.
Does she drain the tub? I thought she
does.
I thought she got interrupted. I thought she turned the tap off.
No, she pulls the tap's not on. She never turns the tap on. It's the weird curse that turns the tap on. Because she actually...
okay.
She come in, she pulls the plug, the phone rings again, and she goes to talk to them. And then whilst he's playing in the tub, he wedges the thing
drain
back in place, and the water comes back on because he's accidentally knocked over the bubbles. That's what that is. She does actually drain it. So it is a kind of like...
I think we play the infant's retelling of it as opposed to what actually happened.
Yes.
But yeah, it's pretty grim because obviously you've got this really cheery music while this is happening, and like you're controlling the frog, and there's an achievement you can get with the frog for knocking, like Gregory's name is on the kind of sticky letters on the bathtub, and you get an achievement for knocking them all off, which I thought was pretty grim. But yeah, this frog, you can like bounce on the whale and you end up turning the tap back on, and yeah, like that ends up being like the end of it's really weird because you try like from a first person perspective. You are the baby, and then you turn into a frog.
The baby turns into a frog, and he's heading towards the light. Yeah,
you swim towards the plug hole, which is the light.
Yeah.
Which is pretty grim. I'll let you go. Well, the next one's Gus, which is like right next to Gregory.
Gus he's the kite, isn't he?
He's the kite one, yeah.
So the family's getting is it the dad? Is it Gregory's dad that's getting remarried? Somebody's getting remarried.
Sam's getting remarried, although I don't think we learn who to.
Yeah. And Gus is really unhappy, so he's standing flying a kite on a very stormy day on this wedding, and you're flying the kite through the letters.
Yeah.
Otherwise the narrative doesn't proceed unless you do that.
Yeah.
And then you have to find the letters as they're mixed in with debris around the beach. So you're gradually picking up more and more debris with your kite, and it culminates in this huge storm where you trash the wedding tent. And it's kind of implied that you get kind of blown away by the storm from like you again. You're kind of like carried out to sea by your kite. So it's another child that should not be allowed to play near the shoreline.
Yeah, I'd say that's another kind of vague one as well. Like because you don't. Like, it looks like you're swept away by the actual wedding tent, but it could just be that you die in the storm.
Yeah. It's very much a series of unfortunate events. It is that very much that kind of vibe where a series of implausible events happen and somebody dies. But Gus is like a kind of like, he doesn't want a stepmother. He's just adamantly flying his kite this whole time. Like, I don't want a stepmother. I don't want a new mother.
And like there's a bit when he gives his dad the finger during the ceremony. He's on his kite and it's like, get
Dad's like, come for the picture, and Gus is like, no.
I do what I want. And that all takes place in like a weird nursery room, but then you can go like ups, like there's to be fair, this sounds amazing, but there's like a climbing wall that you have to go up, and then you climb out the window, and then you can like go further up, and this is you starting to scale the fucking massive tall extension.
It just sounds like every tiny house I've ever seen. Oh yeah, I didn't put a staircase in, I put a climbing wall in. So that when I'm old and decrepit, I won't be able to get into my loft bed.
Exactly. And then there's probably the most vague story that's Milton's, which is the flip book one. So Milton's an artist, and like when Edith's mum moved her and her brothers back to this house, instead of clearing out some of the rooms, which I suppose also speaks to the kind of mindset of Edie, she like added these massive extension, like this honestly kind of Frankenstein extension to the house, which is like this tower of like wooden walkways and platforms. So you're kind of scaling this up, and you end up in Milton's place. Now Milton doesn't necessarily die, he just kind of goes missing.
He vanishes, yeah.
He vanishes, and all that's left is like a flip book, and it's like the flip book tells a kind of story of Milton finding a magic paintbrush, painting himself a door in the wall, and then like opening it and going in. And apparently, I did look this up because it is the most vague story, and it's like linked to one of the studio's other games. But like it's definitely not mentioned.
Yeah, it's very vague. Like, to me, it's like he just ran away.
Yeah.
And he left behind like the book to be like, oh hey, I'm leaving. I've had enough of this weird family.
Bye. Yeah. Oh, he's the protagonist of the previous game, right? That makes sense. And then you climb up more, and it's Edith's kind of eldest brother.
It's the one that gave me the ADHD panic. This is the one that
This is the best one. Did you hate it?
It was like I could see myself. So it is the way my brain works when I get bored enough and I start disassociating. My hand and my brains are doing their own thing. Like when I worked at the checkouts, I would be completely glazed over, eyes not seeing anything, but I'd still be doing the hi, how are you, and welcome to whatever, and I'd be doing all the things. I'd ring everything through, and I wouldn't actually see what I was doing. I would just trust that I was pressing the right buttons for the machine to do the thing.
Yeah.
So the fact that he's standing there doing this while he's working in a cannery and there's a sharp blade next to his hand, I'm like, I would lose my fingers immediately. Because I am that sort of person who does phase out. My head's on other things. I'd be so into the routine of like slice the fish. Like I would have lost a hand on the first day.
Yeah.
That was
Yeah. I'll let you tell this one because it's my absolute favourite. I think
it's a good one. It is a good one.
This is the best story for me.
It fully engaged my fight or flight panic.
If you want, I can do it. I don't mind.
No, it's fine. It's fine. But
cool.
You start out and you're standing there and you are in the cannery and you're picking a fish up and you're taking it. You're cutting the head off with this automated machine, and then you throw the fish away. And the longer you do it, the more bored the character becomes. And like a little thought bubble starts to appear on the other side, and it's him starting to imagine a scenario where he is a hero walking through like a dimly lit dungeon, going from place to place. And meanwhile, you're still doing the fish and with the sharp blade and everything else. And the more you do it, the larger the thought bubble becomes, until it gets to such a point that the thought bubble consumes everything, and you can't actually see what you're doing anymore. You're relying purely on muscle memory to do the thing with the sharp blade. And his story is actually being told from his psychologist.
He's psychiatrist. Yeah, he's just. He's like he just got out of kind of a psychiatry like planned program, I think.
He's out of a facility for substance misuse. And it's kind of implied that his room smells like weed when you're in it.
Yeah.
And it's kind of implied that this is him, like the therapist or whatever, is just like, I was encouraging him because imagination and creation is good, and it gave him a feeling of power or control over his surroundings instead of like whatever.
Yeah.
And it kind of implies that he becomes more and more obsessed with the imagination reality, where he actually becomes king. In his imagination, he becomes king of this magical world. He makes music. You're sailing down a river, and it gives you the choice to marry a beautiful prince or a handsome princess. Yeah. And you can decide that what quests he go on. So the mouse is doing the hand motion for the fish and the thing, and then your keyboard hand is moving the hero at the same time through the hero's narrative.
Yeah.
So it's kind of like rubbing your belly and patting your head at the same time.
Yeah.
And you're having to do both those things. And I had to pause several times because I'm like, I really struggle to do that sort of thing for prolonged periods of time. But it gets to the point where it's like the psychologist is telling the mother, there is nothing you could have done. He was just so far in this unreality that he didn't want to come out.
And he preferred it to his...
He prefers it to his mundane life, yeah. Like, and
there's, sorry, I know you've already said it, but like one of the coolest things about the game design here is that like eventually the entire screen is just this fantasy, but you've still got the, if you think about it, like layers in Photoshop, you've still got the fish getting like flopped onto the screen, like over the top of it. So you're still being able to do it, and it is that dual thing. I was playing on the Xbox, and it's actually just the two toggles, which is quite cool.
For me on the keyboard, it was a trip because I'm like, my mouse is doing the repetitive
L shape,
and then my hands are like, my left hand was doing something completely different.
Yeah.
And I was like, this is hell. This is not intuitive to my brain at all. But the ending's really, in the ending, you are outside of yourself, looking in at your brother. And you see him standing there, and he's not even picking up fish anymore. He's just standing there, his hand doing the repetitive motion. You get on the kind of conveyor belt that kills the fish or whatever, and it takes you fully into this realm of fantasy that he's created.
Yeah, and he's getting crowned.
He's going to his coronation.
Hey,
we came back in. The last thing he has to do is put his head down to be crowned by his queen, and he puts his head down on top of a guillotine-shaped pedestal thing.
Yeah. And
the blade just comes down and it ends.
Yeah.
And it's kind of implied that he puts his head into the fish killing machine at work.
Yeah.
And that was, I had to pause the game. I had to get up and walk around. The infant one, I was not as distressed by. Yeah. But this one, I was like, I could see myself doing that. I could fully, my ADHD Ash would just disassociate and I would accidentally kill myself. Like, it is just that level of like, this tapped directly into some deep panic inside of me. Like, unexpected, but I'll take it. Like, it was really fascinating. It was really interesting the way it was done.
Yeah, as like that bit alone is just incredible from a game design perspective, because it works really, really well. So after you kind of find Lewis's story kind of comes to an end, you climb up to the highest point, and that's Edith's room. So it's like your old room, the main character's room. You go in, you sit down, and you basically start writing everything that your character's narrated.
Also pregnant, 22 weeks pregnant, and climbing over all these houses and hills and God knows what. So
yeah, and so you end up writing all that, and you kind of find, I think it's like, She basically, she's recalling the kind of final night, because after Lewis died, the mum was like, we are all leaving this house. We are all being the only three that are left, which is Edie, or Edith Senior, Dawn, the mum, and then Edith herself. And there's an argument at the dinner table. Edith's kind of like excused to go and get something from Edie's room.
A gift. Yeah.
A gift, yeah. And she can like hear her mum and her great grandmum arguing. And it's like, I mean, for me, that's kind of like the most important bits here is like, Dawn says to Edie, it's like, your stories have killed my kids. And you end, like, when Edith picks up the gift, our mum kind of finds it, and they tussle over the book, and the book ends up ripping, because basically Edie's written all of the stories for Edith, and I've given it to her as a book. And
she's written a story about the house that sunk under the ocean.
Yes,
I desperately want to know more about that, and you don't get to find out.
And to be honest, I think that's the best thing though. Is like, it's clever in terms of how they do it. Like, obviously there is that cliffhanger kind of, I really want to find out, but I think it plays into the ending of the game not seeing it, because the whole Edie's saying that there was a point where it was like the lowest tide in history, and she was able to walk all the way out to the ruin of the house that Edie's dad had tried to sail from Norway, but then she gets there and a light turns on in the house, and ghost story, and then it's cut by Edith's mum ripping it out of her hands, going, what the fuck, don't read that. and then she gets kind of like whisked away, and like the last thing you kind of see is you have to turn the camera and you basically look at Edie, who's like in a I think she's in like a walker or something.
She's in like a Zimmer
yeah, kind of Zimmer frame thing.
Mm-hmm.
And
she's watching them leave, and she's refusing to leave the house. Like, they were like, "Oh, the care home's going to come and take you," and she's like, "No, they're not."
Yeah,
and they don't find her.
Yeah, I think she dies that night. Mm-hmm. And then you learn that like Don's mum had an illness that died, and then the game kind of ends where it's basically implied like you're the child of Edith, having been born. It's kind of alluded to that Edith died in childbirth.
Yeah.
And then the game kind of cuts to credits. And that's the that's the full thing, isn't it?
It is very well done. It is.
Oh yeah, it's great.
Point, it is masterful. From a game mechanic perspective, it's really good too.
Yeah, the only thing I missed, and I mean, from a gameplay perspective, I totally understand, but like, I did kind of miss like the ability to run, like see Edith's walk in to the house.
Shift.
I was like, please run like, a little bit. But yeah, it was really good. And it's one that you can probably analyze to death. Because obviously I think having narrated a lot of that, it's quite obvious what killed a lot of them, as in each story is tragic, but it's quite clear what did do. Like for Molly, it's not ambiguous. It's not a monster under the bed. It was the poisoned berries, the old gerbil or hamster food, and the full bottle of toothpaste that she ate.
Neglect.
Oh yeah,
a lot of it's just like parents not watching, like again building a swing set on the precipice of a cliff face overlooking the ocean.
But tell
me you don't want kids anymore.
Yeah, I mean this is why I think like the way that the curse operates in the story is more as like. I imagine it was initially a coping mechanism, but then it just became like a weird justification for doing dangerous shit. Like, because I think you never hear you do hear how Sven dies, but Sven doesn't have his own story. But it's said that Sven dies building a dragon-shaped slide onto the side of the house as like a fun thing for the kids to play on. And Edie always said that he was killed by a dragon as opposed to he was killed by a dragon slide that fucking
He was killed
broke.
in a construction accident.
Yeah.
Because the house is so ramshackle built and not up to code.
Yeah. So, but like, I feel like a lot of it's Edie's fault. Like, in regards to just like spin.
So like, comment, he was killed by OSHA violations.
Yeah. I mean, like, obviously you can see what you want about, like, so Edie, the mysticism of this family curse, it killed her dad. Her dad tried to sail a fucking house across the Atlantic. It's kind of on him, really.
Well, it's the kind of it's almost like they're this grand mythologization of their own family tragedy.
Yeah,
and it's like a commitment to the bit of the tragedy that it has to continue. It has to be romanticized.
Yeah,
because it's like, who else would enshrine all these things but someone who is committed to, oh, we're such a tragic cursed family. It's like the Addams family are weird and kooky and like kind of that sort of like, oh yeah, it's so tragic, but they're not like, I don't know, it's almost like the opposite. Like the Addams family survive no matter what because they're committed to surviving and being together, whereas Edie's family is like committed to being the biggest tragedy to have ever happened instead of actually taking responsibility for their family. And it starts with Odin just taking his entire house across the ocean and then ignoring weather advisories.
Yeah. Molly. Like, Molly's just an example of, like, like basically bad parenting, as in the way to deal with Molly for misbehaving was to send her to bed without any dinner. And it led to a tragedy of Molly eating things that she shouldn't have had access to. There shouldn't have been mistletoe decorations in a room that a young child who maybe doesn't know all that stuff could eat. So like that, that's Molly. Then you've got Calvin, who fucking dies by playing on a swing set that's built on a fucking cliff's edge, which, by the way, it's interesting because obviously you see the kind of neglect and carelessness that leads to like the deaths of the kids, but like he's got his whole leg in a cast when he's on the swing, and it's like, I wonder what stupid shit that like the family got up to that led to that. Also, not just the cliff, but like there's a spiked white fence in front of you as well.
Oh, which, it's like you're just like getting impaled if you fall off the swing at a regular height.
Yeah. And then there's Barbara's an interesting one.
Barbara, because it's hard because she's killed by vampires and werewolves and like.
Is it like I'm guessing the boyfriend did it?
I'm guessing it's the boyfriend, or it's some sort of stalker fan, because the family there had a child star and she wasn't protected from that. That would be my from what we learn about child stars, they don't get protected by their families; they're exploited. So maybe the family just let like crazy stalker fans into the house, and because it was money, hey.
Yeah.
So that could be it as well.
Sorry, I'm just going to quickly let the boy out the room. He's being a nuisance.
Crying for his mother.
Go on, you.
You can hear the cat bell in the background.
Sorry. Boy was screaming. Yeah, I think like, so one of the things that I think's quite telling, and what I think Edie is like, this is why I think Edie's evil, right? But like the comic specifically references the map of the house, like that it's only something that a family member would know. And I think the thing that like hammers that the most is the fact that the comic includes how to open the basement.
Yes.
I think Edie colluded with some like, unethical comic book creator to make like this myth of the family curse. Same with the mole man thing in
her
in
brother,
the room.
like her brother underneath the house, and she's like, oh yeah, there's mole men. It's like, your brother who's staying under there.
I think it was her son, is it not? Yeah,
it could be.
Family tree's wild. But yeah, it's I mean, the fact that Walter didn't want to go up through the house, maybe he didn't want to fucking see his mum.
It could be.
I mean, he literally went down and took a sledgehammer out into a railway so he wouldn't have to speak to his mum or see his like family. Because he was still he was living in the house when Edith had moved back in.
Yeah, and she had no idea he was down there.
Yeah. I'm trying to think who else. I mean, obviously Sam being a stupid idiot with the deer thing, like that's just so obvious carelessness.
Yeah, he's got a lot of that kind of like the hunting paraphernalia because there's people that hunt to survive, and there's there's obviously like indigenous communities to which hunting is very vital. To him, it was very kind of like doomsday preppery. I'm going to force my 8-year-old to kill an animal because that's the harsh reality of the world.
Yeah,
it's like,
was he not also in the army? I think
he was. Yeah,
army or Marines or whatever. Yeah,
because the thing the narrator actually makes the comment, he was committed to chasing death. Like he was resigned to the family curse. He was like, oh, it's going to get me one way or another. And it's like,
nah, probably not want to do that. Gregory, we've already talked about. Shouldn't have been left in a bathtub by himself.
Yeah.
Gus probably shouldn't have let a young kid, even if he was in a huff on a stormy beach, like
flying a massive kite. Yes.
Yeah, maybe not the wisest choice.
I mean, kids do need they need supervision when they're doing some. There's times when I can be like, yeah, I can understand how accidents happen because you don't have eyes in the back of your head, and you do sometimes think, yeah, they'll be fine. But like, you have a family history of tragedy where someone has already fallen off the edge of this cliff.
Yeah.
Why are you letting a child fly a kite on one of the blusteriest days in history?
Yeah. Yeah, it doesn't seem like a good choices. Milton vanished, which I'm gonna read as in he didn't want to be around the family. Maybe it was too toxic. Maybe Edie was too toxic. I don't know. Like he left somehow.
He left to be in another game. That's
yeah. Lucy's story, I think, is probably one of the more tragic ones, though. As in, from a like, it wasn't really a neglect side because he was getting psychiatric help and all the rest of it. But I think it kind of speaks to maybe the home environment just being so fucking bleak. Because, like, I think one of the things we neglected to mention is that so Dawn, Edith's mum, sealed up all the rooms, and it was Edie that made all the peepholes into the rooms.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's quite weird that obviously, the house became this kind of Frankenstein.
It's a very kind of like voyeuristic horror. It's that kind of like in all the haunted like castles and stories, the monster's always peering at you through like cut eyes through the portraits, or they've got access to watch you. Edie is the one putting these kind of like peepholes into place so that she can be a part of every aspect of their tragedy.
Yeah.
And it's very invasive.
And just like, I mean, the fact that Edie refuses to leave as well is like she almost revels in the tragedy of it all, She's like, she loves being around it. But yeah, Dawn sealed up all of the doors so that the kids wouldn't go and learn the stories. And I mean, like, I think the date on, in fact, let's see if there must be a map. Yeah, so there's a map that has the dates of them all, and Molly dies in like 1947, and it's like 2017 in game, I'm pretty sure. So, like, that room has stayed the fucking same for that. Like, they are, like, obviously, when families deal with tragedies, like, obviously you hear about parents sometimes turning the kids' room into a shrine. But it's like 1947. Fuck. Like,
a long time to have something memorialized.
Yeah. Interesting comment on how grief locked away or peeped at isn't actually processed and continues to haunt the family. That's a good way of looking at it, Tundra. Yeah.
It's that very kind of like it is that kind of like when you're processing trauma, you can't lock things away because you do not process them. Like, that's a huge thing with like when people talk about triggers and stuff. Doing the work for healing means that when you are triggered, it doesn't cause you to completely collapse anymore. Whereas if you constantly try to lock things away and never think about it or never talk about it, it actually makes things worse for some people. And I think the game is very on point with like Edie is determined to just stay within the tragedy. Whereas the mum tries to kind of like block her kids away from it and block her.
Dawn seems to be the most normal person in the family.
Yeah.
And maybe that speaks to how she just dies of illness. Yeah. Because she frequently makes attempts to escape it. And, like, I think not wanting to be too real with it all, but I've encountered people in my time who, when they've lost someone, like, obviously it's really important for, like, lots of people, but I know some people who, like, maybe it's like some people who I lost my grandpa when I was really young. I think I was like 3 or 4, and like I know people who also lost their grandparents at age 3 or 4, but like as recent as like 2020, we're still posting like annually on the death. Like, you know, I'll like,
yeah.
And I'm not like, I don't want to kind of dismiss that connection. I mean, you might at 4 years old have had a really tight relationship with your grandparent, but like, I definitely know a lot of people who it's more about the display of tragedy than it is about the internal processing of grief.
So we had a death in the family not too long ago on my family side, and people who my parents had never seen didn't help. It was a very tragic circumstance. I had an uncle who was in a care home from the age of 12 onwards, and family members who had never once contributed to his care, had never shown up for Christmases or birthdays. They all showed up to the funeral, and they were all taking pictures.
Yeah.
At the funeral.
All giving it the big one on the Facebook posts and stuff like that. Yeah. Fuck, it always happens.
And they do it every year now. They post something about it, and it's like, okay, well, you did show up for their life.
Yeah.
And it's that kind of pretty toxic kind of that's exactly what Edie feels like to me. It's that kind of toxic wanting to hold on to the tragedy because the tragedy makes you special.
Yeah, and it's why I show Edie no quarter in this fucking game. Like I don't think a lot of like I've seen quite a lot of like interpretation of Edie as this like sympathetic character who's just struggling and has had so much tragedy happens. But like if you look at all of the like Edith does quite a lot of commentary about like, oh, Edie would have loved this, or Edie would like this, and then you see all the, you know, Edie gives a report to the news and is the centre of attention about the tragedy, or like she doesn't say, oh, my husband died in a construction accident. She, oh, my husband was killed by a dragon. She revels in the attention and stuff of it. So it's like maybe Edie is the curse. Full stop. That's it. Edie's the curse.
It could have been solved if they just left her in Norway.
Yeah, the one thing that I can kind of understand, because you probably want to give that little bit of a teaser, but I did think that Edith dying in childbirth was almost like an attempt to allude that there might be a curse, whereas I actually think that dying in childbirth is just a family tragedy that is normal and couldn't be associated with any curse.
I mean, it's still so normal. Like in the US, mortality rate for pregnancies is still a thing. It's not ye olden times. It's still very much a thing. But I do think you're right. I think the game was trying to be like, oh, they gave us that little flash of the haunted house. But who's to say that's not just Edie being an unreliable narrator and trying to make up more than it is?
Yeah.
You know, who's to say there's not something like my situation where there's a weird health defect.
Yeah.
And it's not been diagnosed because the family's like, that is literally what happened with my family. Nobody wanted to unravel the mystery of the family curse. It took me going, fuck this shit, and taking myself to a geneticist because I'm like, this is not normal. Maybe they have something similar. Maybe they're like the Dawn dies because of a family gene defect that causes all these stupid accidents to happen.
Yeah.
Like, maybe there's just something. Maybe they have like a brittle bone disease or a blood disorder. Like, who knows? But the game does very kind of like try to like cop out with the like, oh, maybe it's the curse. And it's like, well, if it is the curse, the person we've just been playing the game as is doomed.
Yeah.
So, good luck. Doomed by the narrative.
I suppose is I kind of wish that the last kind of decision from Edith was just to not share the story at all, because like obviously you play as the kid and the kid is marking the like the grave of Edith, like years on, and you're kind of like, oh, I wish you hadn't learned about all that. Save yourself.
I'm much happier not knowing that your family's just a fucking nightmare. speaking from experience, like there's things you don't need to know.
Yeah, exactly. But no, I think that was quite a comprehensive retelling of
It
What
was.
Remains of Edith Finch. It's a really good game, and I would recommend it to anyone who like.
Not for if you've got problems with child and animal death. Maybe not for you, but it is a fascinating story, and the game mechanics are just like the game mechanics are stunning for it. I would never have thought to play a game that way until I did this, and I was like, wow, I hate this. It's genius, but my English did not enjoy that at all.
Yeah. No. Alrighty, folks. I think we will wrap it up there because we have went on a wee bit longer. There we go. See, we neglect you for a wee while on the podcast front, and then we redeem ourselves by giving you an extra long episode. So hopefully that's a tick in a box, and we won't get abuse on Tumblr asks about it.
I only had one ask that was shitty, to be fair. The others have just been like, hey, are you guys okay? But there was one that was like, you're not committed anymore. And it was just like, I don't care.
sorry that we've been hit by illness and burnout and everything else. But no, for those of you who are listening on the podcast platform of your choice, thank you very much for listening. If you are in the Twitch chat, stay and hang around because we do a kind of little ending segment after each one. But thank you very much if you're listening, and we will catch you in the next one. Bye bye.
Bye bye.